Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Summoners Rift Radio League podcast. My name is Suho, and we're joined by Zippo here, the one and only. Today, we're going to be talking about quite a broad subject, but quite a fun one as well. And that's the new patch, the new season to League of Legends, and just our thoughts on this wonderful game. So first of all, I'll hand it over to Zippo for him to give us his thoughts on this new patch.
Hello everybody, Zipper here. So first thing I want to address is I apologize for camera quality. I'm using my laptop, but this will be an issue that is fixed in upcoming streams. And the second thing is new items. Wow. Wow. Okay, let's get started. I think the first thing, probably the most important thing, is mage items. Probably
Yeah.
Storm Surge in particular. This is an item that came out and has been hotfix nerfed and is still, in my opinion, probably a little bit too strong. But what are your thoughts as an ADC player?
You guys will also have to excuse the fact that he might lag a little bit, but we'll get as much as he says. My thoughts on the Storm Surge item as an ADC or support player is very unfun. I'll put it that way. Very recently in many of my solo queue games,
A little bit too much.
Bro, I have been the victim to very few abilities hitting me and my health bar being drained completely, and it's it's a little bit difficult to deal with. The item itself, I think, is a fantastic item, and I think it's a really cool concept of an item. But yeah, I think even with the hotfixes, it's still just a little bit too powerful that it's just a little bit unfun to play against.
Too bursty, yeah. Because I've been looking at this item for a little while now, and it looks like a bit of a bait item as a mage player or a burst mage player. Until you kind of use it and you go, oh, Magic Pen is underrated as hell. Yep. Obviously, having more access to Magic Pen is a big deal as a mage player. But also the build path, like Amp Tombs being 400 gold each.
Oh, so beautiful.
Like, you go to base, you can buy anything you want, really. Mm-hmm. The old issue was that AD Assassins just, like, destroyed mages in lane purely because of the 350 longsword cost.
Yep.
So they come back with 3 or 4 longswords and you have no answer, right? No. Like, you get a cloth armor. It doesn't quite fix the situation, like, it's not enough.
Yep.
Whereas now it's like, okay, you just stack damage. It's going to build into something later, so you just keep building damage. You keep building tombs.
Yeah. I think it's crazy that even at 400 gold, it is still less gold efficient than a longsword, Like, longsword has just been the king of gold efficiency. But it's lovely that now, on your first back as, a mage, if you were to get first blood, what the hell are you buying? A tier or some boots or a dark seal? Now at least you can
so
amp tome.
This is where things have really become interesting, because they have nerfed mages for so long because of how efficient they were without gold. And now they've given them options with gold, like, quite literally, they've given them a billion different items to choose from.
Yep.
And mages are like, oh my god, this is amazing. Everyone else is like, oh my god, this is shit. Like, no one wants to deal with a Syndra that's doing 80% of your health in one combo. Like,
and that's pre-ulti.
Exactly. Like, it's just one trade. It doesn't feel right. The lane's too short. It doesn't feel right to do one bad trade, and that's it. It's awful. So, I think they're going to have to tone down a little bit of the numbers, especially on mage items, because the Amp Tomb, look, it's a little bit too strong. Most AD Assassins don't scale very well at all.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say most, I mean all of them.
Yeah.
Quite literally, all of them have crash scaling. And the reason for that is because their item diversity is so good. Right? Like, they can build longswords until the day is over, and it's not a problem. So, now that mages can do the same thing effectively, they're going to have to change something. They're obviously very clearly in the, early stages of this, because you can see they are, they've taken away a lot of ability haste from all these items.
Yeah.
And that's changed a lot of like meta matchups. But you can kind of see like a lot of champions have just really not benefited from
No.
it at all. Like Oriana feels very weak right now, even though she's a staple in pro play.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Quay, the new champion, just feels awful, like absolutely awful, because he was designed with the premise of like, I don't know, upwards of 50 cooldown reduction. Like
Yeah.
all this stuff was built around the premise of ability haste being easily obtainable, and it's not anymore. So the meta has totally switched. Champions like Fizz, assassins in particular, AP assassins in particular, are just abusing the new items.
Yep.
I don't think we've ever had a meta before where like 100 plus AP on an item was meta or like stable.
No.
I like tell me if I'm wrong, but
That's a that's
I
a
don't think I can remember a time where AP items have had this much AP. Like,
I was gonna say that's my question. It was gonna be a question for you, is because with these changes, you've seen a lot less cooldown reduction, and I believe it was a Freak stream where he said they've taken a lot
yeah,
of the cooldown reduction and they want to give items, something to compensate. So they've just given everything kind of AP. But to me,
exactly.
you look at an item like Banshees, which is always been a defensive item throughout as long as it's been an item. You
There's a
never
trade-off with that
yeah,
item. Yeah,
exactly. You never bought it to be a damaging item. You bought it because it was a spell shield and
exactly.
it saved you. But now you can buy it while still doing ridiculous damage. Like it's 120 AP on a defensive item.
See,
It just seems too
this is
much.
where I really disagree with some of Riot's design decisions because they created this post and they said they wanted to take away item. What's the word I'm looking for? They wanted to take away the agency from items and put it into the champions themselves. Is basically what they said.
Yeah.
They didn't do that at all. Like it's not even close. Items, if anything, have been more broken than they've ever been before.
Mm-hmm.
And certain champions abuse that better than others, which is why you've seen stuff like full on lethality Aatrox pop up,
Yeah.
like full burst mages mid that wouldn't normally build burst.
Yeah.
And personally, I think ability haste was actually a good check for a lot of mages because it benefits all of them, but some more than others. And I actually think ability haste is not that big of an issue. I just think the numbers needed tuning a little bit because I think certain champions rely on the ability to cast often,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Well, yeah. On that topic,
And it opens up opportunities for counterplay and whatnot.
yeah.
That in a full burst meta where everyone one shots everything is
Yeah.
not possible.
And on
And
that
it
topic, Raven just added Syndra feels weird. He said that she was a spam shove kind of champion with all the cooldown reduction, and now she's back to that kind of 2-3 second cooldowns on your
exactly.
kits. And then he's saying it's feeling really awkward to kind of, which I think is
It
true.
feels really bad.
Yeah, yeah,
No, it feels awful to play as. Like if you play Syndra, if you've played Syndra ever, it feels really, really awful right now. And it's not because it feels bad to hit someone off a stun and one shot them when you've got an item. It's because lane phase feels really awkward. Like some matchups are just impossible. They are.
yes, yeah,
Champions like Fizz, etc. Like if you play Syndra, if you blind pick Syndra and you verse a Fizz that actually knows what they're doing, they can be 20 CS to your 100 at the 10-minute mark. And it won't really matter because the items are so good for them. Whereas how like they're not that great for you, you can be that far ahead and it just doesn't feel right.
yeah,
Like how in normal League of Legends you feel you're so strong because you're 10 and 0 and you're playing a champion's broken, like you feel amazing, like you're one-shotting everything. And then at this point it's like, oh okay, I one-shot something with QE, but I have no defensive stats unless I spec into Banshees or Zhonya's, which feel overly loaded into like damage stats
yeah.
because they're like 120 AP
Both of
each
them.
right now.
Yeah, yeah.
It's insane. It's a lot of damage, and it's not geared to what the item is intended for.
No.
So it kind of just builds into this late game fantasy of everything gives damage.
Mm,
So, like, the stronger you get, the harder you're gonna one shot someone.
yeah. Yeah.
I don't think anyone's really enjoying that right now.
No. But as we expected, we talked about AP items for a while there, so I think we've covered kind of what we need to. We've got a few comments on one of the items you really wanted to talk about, Hubris, and then also Sundered Sky.
Okay, Hubris.
So
Hubris, I'm excited for this.
I know Zippo wanted to talk about it, so I'll let him go with this one and see what his opinion is on this wonderful snowbally item.
Look, Hubris has my heart because I'm a Zed player. Everyone knows this. But this is probably the only assassin item in the game that actually benefits Zed more than any other champion because of the way he can play. So this is why I love this item. It's a risk and reward item. It doesn't quite have its place in League of Legends, but I think it needs to be here. A lot of people sit here and be like, hubris is dumb, hubris is whatever. I'm sitting here telling you, if AD assassins don't have a way to snowball, they're not going to be a thing in League. And that's okay. But, come on.
Yeah. It's a little bit
Summer,
strong.
fuck you. Anyways.
The problem is a lot of ADCs are buying Hubris. Yes,
So
this
is the other point I was going to come from. So lethality in its current state is not broken. I'm telling you right now, it's not broken. There's one thing they can do to fix it, and it's not hard at all.
Mm-hmm.
All they have to do is reduce the effectiveness of lethality by like 30% for range champs. It's not hard. Yeah. They know why range champs are abusing lethality is because lethality is a great stat. Like armor pen, free armor pen, hell yeah. I'm a little bit surprised that Riot has not been able to fix this.
Quite frankly, just look at a champion like Senna. Just look at a champion like Senna. They pick up an early Dirk or even just any of the new early lethality items, and you're like half health within 3 autos or an auto Q auto, and it's just it's such a safe range as well. Yeah, it's way too convenient for them to just half health you at such a safe distance while still getting the full value of the item that was initially intended to be a melee assassin item, right?
Exactly.
All of them were intended to be on your Talons and Zeds and stuff. You get your Sennas and all that kind of, Lucians you spec into it, Samiras, all that. It's just too easy for them being ranged champions.
But this is what I mean, like, obviously, like, scaling range champions should be abusing crit. They should be. That's how it thematically works.
Yeah.
And the melee assassins should be abusing lethality, which is how it should be working. So I don't understand how it's so hard for Riot to come to the conclusion that range champs just shouldn't use lethality as well.
As Harold said...
Then I think about the fact that there are champions like Jace.
Mm-hmm. Well... Maybe
I'm thinking, like, if you remove the lethality build path for him, what has he got, really?
Yeah. I don't know. I think just, like, a couple of comments in stream. One was that they'll never do a range debuff because of your champions like Jhin, Samira, and Nyla, who don't use the traditional ADC items as well. And, I mean... Surely there's some way you can cap it to a range, because they're all short-ranged ADs, right? Most of them. Cap it to their range, cap it to something. There's something you should be able to do. Jin's a little bit of a tough one, because obviously the 4 autos, he loves his lethality and his abilities. It works great, but he also does scale really well with crit. It just feels like crit items at the moment compared to the much easier bursty AP and lethality items. It's just too slow. It's not as impactful enough, right? Like, crit items just aren't feeling the greatest at the moment at all.
What Riot was trying to go for here is that they made tanks a little bit tankier, but made late game DPS a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
I think they missed the mark on DPS late game. Because the crit items don't feel good.
The crit items, yes. On-hit champions are perfectly fine, I think.
They feel great, yeah. I play Jinx, I play on-hit every single time. And it's not because
You know, the change to Bork is fantastic for ADCs to proc on first auto for the kiting and what have you. What's that new item called? Is it Terminus or whatever? Like,
Terminus,
fantastic item
stacking
for on-hit ADCs for these long fights. But the issue is you don't get these long fights, especially in a solo queue sense, right? They're just too scrappy and too bursty and too quick and over and done. Whereas you watch things like pro play, and ADC is one of the most important roles currently with the items and with how the game works, because they kind of play more to how it's meant to work rather than you would solo queue. So you get a lot of ADCs that really matter and are getting to that point where they're shooting tanks and that. But especially in a solo queue and kind of your mid to lower elos, you're never gonna get to that point because people are just, it's Fiesta as it is. So all of these lethality and burst mages and snowbally ADCs that are abusing the items just get to run away with games because that's just how solo queue kind of goes a lot of the time.
Yeah. I think a very large problem is they added a lot of damage. Like, they said they weren't going to, and they said they wanted to take identity away from items and put it into champions, and the exact opposite happened. And I don't think it was due to them, like, not trying to do what they were saying they were going to do, but it's just more so... Yeah, I think they realized halfway through that patch kind of thing, where they're trying to fix everything, that you can't, like, this is more than one patch worth of... What's the word I'm looking for? Like, it's more than one patch worth of design fixing, if that makes sense. It's a long road for this one. Because they've removed mythics, and that's a big change. That's a really big change. It's a good change, in my opinion.
Yes, I agree. It's a fantastic
change. I think the mythic
change.
system shoehorned a lot of champions into just building one very specific build path. But at the very same time, I think this new patch has just given everyone too many options. I think it's okay to have a bit of damage. I think some assassins should be a threat. Especially like champions like Fizz, which I absolutely hate as a mid lane player. I fucking hate it. I'm telling you right now. Fizz can eat a dick. But the champion needs to have some sort of like win con, right? And the win con for Fizz is basically mid game. So yeah, absolutely. Items that give crit chance on AP items, fantastic for Fizz. It gives a whole lot of, I don't know, like a different way of playing the game, if that makes sense. It's kind of like you can play lane without don't even know how to say it.
Chat right now are vibing with you. It's all just fuck Fizz. All my homies hate Fizz. Yeah, that champion is
all my homies hate. Yeah.
Like, it's bullshit, down
but like at the same time, if the champion's useless, it might as well not be a champion. You know, like, the champion's there to make playing like control mages, etc. harder. And it makes sense. It's kind of like Yi being in the game. Like, the champion is there to fill a purpose, and that's okay. The problem is when you reach one item as a champion and you spike so hard that that's all you need.
It's like the joke about Irelia when she hits Vamp Scepter and she's full build, right? Or when she hits Bork. It's just
dead on.
It's too much in one item to be like, okay, well, cool. And the biggest issue again is that you have these champions spiking with this one item, but then they don't fall off. They just get stronger and stronger and stronger, and it's like their spike is way too early for them to still be an even bigger monster later game. Like, there's no drop off. There's no weak middle game when they're at their 2-3 item. We possibly just lost Zippo. I have no idea what's happened there. He's there was a risk of this happening. So for now, I'll just pick up the conversation here. Yeah, I was going to ask Zippo a question about like a durability patch, or whether an interesting concept of just if you sliced every single stat in half, how would that affect the game, sort of thing. So because Zippo's not here, I'm going to throw it out to chat for your opinions on the matter, and just ask you whether a durability patch or just the impact of just kind of cutting all the items in half and kind of seeing what that does, what you think the game would be like. Like, is that going to fix this too much damage? I know we've already had a durability patch. Is another one needed? Yeah, exactly. Like, durability patch doesn't feel like it exists anymore, right? Like, I know it was a few years ago now, but it definitely felt a lot better then, and it just feels... Zippo Piss Break Live. Just reduce damage by 25%. But if you reduce damage by just 25% straight off, do then tanks not become too tanky? I understand that they also do damage, but do tanks then become too tanky, or do you think that tanks aren't tanky enough, so damage cut would be fine? Because I think tanks at the moment are good, but there feels like there's a lot of situations where they're not quite tanky enough, and they still do too much damage. So I just wonder whether cutting damage would actually solve that issue. Something that Zippo and I were... They would have to nerf tank items, but a little. Yeah, I think so. There was something that Zippo and I were talking about prior to him, or prior to the stream, sorry, where we were talking about the identity of champions is kind of coming back. So obviously you have a lot of burst mages, and their job is to one-shot ADCs or supports and whatever, and that's fantastic. And obviously they're not meant to do a lot of damage to tanks, but we were discussing that there's just not enough damage at all to tanks, while tanks still do too much to you, right? Like, burst mages into tanks, as I was saying, feels like an absolutely horrid matchup, just based on the fact that the items don't really allow you to deal with tanks anymore, and the tank items are still doing still just a little too much damage coming from tanks, in my opinion. I think a lot of the new tank items, like you get your magic damage, Sunfire, I think it's something Despair, the one that drains every 7. I think these items are fantastic, but again, it's all just damage on tanks that I think is too much at the moment. Is that you, Zippo?
It is me.
Hello, he's back!
It's a little bit unstable here.
That is all right. Just to catch you up, I just gave chat a quick question that I was going to ask you of whether another durability patch or something like cutting every stat and items in half or something would change the game. And then we had a quick talk about tanks doing too much damage and basically the amount of options that tanks have for damage, especially into like your burst mages that we kind of talked about prior to stream. So far, Blooded agreed that, he said just reduce damage by like 25%, nerf tank items a little bit, so that it kind of matches up.
Here we go. This is spicy. Yes.
I'll quickly go through.
So,
and then there's like there's not enough itemization to kill tanks is another comment there. So that's with aces as well, with not enough armor pins. So I know you were a bit passionate about this one, so I'll let you speak on the
thank you.
On the
okay, here we go. I apologize to anyone watching who was not ready for a full-on... like, here we go, you know? But yes, the pen items is something I really want to talk about because pen in general has been hella nerfed this patch. Hella nerfed. Tanks got buffed and the pen items got nerfed. You can't stack them anymore at all.
You can't even cleaver and
cleaver last whisper. Like, and this is coming from someone who's been playing top lane recently. It's pretty clear how it's affected the top lane meta. Champions like Fiora, etc., that have true damage on all these abilities, like, it's so much harder to lane against a tank now that has inbuilt percent health damage, like all this stuff that was added years ago because of the fact that tanks did no damage. So they're like, oh, we'll make them do percent health damage. So like, at least they're a threat. And it makes sense. And then all these new items come in. It doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense anymore. Like, we don't have the damage to kill tanks. I've seen 6-item poppies literally spam laugh in front of high DPS 80 carries and just soak damage
Yeah.
to the point where it shouldn't be legal.
Yeah.
And then you have ADCs that are like basically three hitting champions because they're building lethality as well. And lethality doesn't like counter scale anymore. It doesn't, you know what I mean? It's just a flat ratio. So the items are very clearly imbalanced.
Yeah.
And I think penetration is probably the most unbalanced part of it. And it's only because tanks, they have so many more options now. And I'm going to say ADCs, even though I think it's pretty much every class in general. They
Mm-hmm.
don't have the penetration items available to like get through a late game tank
Yeah.
anymore. So late game tanks just feel disgusting. And mid game, anything that doesn't survive one rotation feels awful.
Yeah. I agree.
Items have been buffed. That's all I can really say.
Yes, yeah, I agree. Do you think that they just need to allow multiple pin items then being purchased on a champion? Do you think that's an easy fix for it, or is it a lot deeper than that? Do you think that just the
I
new
think
items
I thought
compared
about this
to...
quite a bit, and I think if they did do that, it would be too easy.
Yeah.
I think carries would reign supreme again, and it wouldn't even be close. Like
Mm-hmm.
tanks, they might seem really, really strong right now, but they're holding on by a thread. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't take much to
It's a
undo that.
fine line before they become, not tanky again.
Exactly. And
Mm-hmm.
I actually think that like where they have them right now in terms of tankiness is not a bad place to be. I think if you are a tank, you need to be a tank, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you need to stand out a little bit
Yeah.
in terms of beefiness. But you shouldn't be able to one-shot carries.
No.
That's not a thing.
There are
It
too
shouldn't be a
many.
thing.
There are too many. Like
Yeah.
the thing with the
You can
despair
stall
item.
them, you can delay them, etc. Like you can
Yeah.
do a lot of things that make sense in this kind of game.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't be one-shotting a carry just for
No.
being out of position. You
I.
can't. It's
I.
it's too much.
Yeah. I don't see why the item, the despair item that drains every 7 seconds, has to actually do damage. Why can it not just heal you every 7 seconds that you're in combat, sort of thing? Or even lower that cooldown to 5 seconds and not have it do damage? Then it's less
Thank
oppressive
you for
and it
raising this
just...
point.
You know
Thank
what?
you.
Why do tank items have to do damage and sustain me? Why can they not just
See, this
sustain?
is the thing. They don't. They don't. This is Riot's design philosophy. In Dota, which people are gonna hate that I compare the games, but whatever. Like it's fine. Look, in Dota, they prefer to spec into like what a character or champion, etc., like whatever you want to call it. They prefer to spec into what that does well and make it better.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in League, it feels like you kind of cover your weaknesses, if that makes
That's the
sense.
thing. Champions lose their identity of just a tank or just a burst mage or just an
Yeah.
assassin, and you get
And
so
it
many
feels like it
champions
comes
that
from
do
the point
so
of
many
the items are
things.
too strong. Like
Yeah.
the items have more of an impact than the champions do. And Riot addressed this. They said this in the patch notes. They said, look, we want champions to have their own identity and we want these identities to be played out like better via the items they're given. Like you can choose kind of to spec into something.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is more like, okay, Zonya's big damage item
Yep.
plus defensive item.
Yep.
And I'm not just saying mage items. This is even top lane like bruiser items as well. Like this has been going on for ages. We have Death's Dance. Why?
Yeah.
Why
What
is there
a...
an item that gives you like pure offensive stats, but also like probably the best defensive stats in the game? Because it's flat damage reduction.
Yeah.
Like it's not. I'm trying to make sense of it all as I go along.
Yeah.
And champions that abuse like Hullbreaker, Death Dance, none of it makes
Oh,
sense to me
Hullbreaker, man. I'm so
as a
glad
player.
that item is no longer what it was. It was
But
just
that's what I mean. Like
disgusting.
this item has been broken for years, like
Mm-hmm.
absolutely years.
Spear of Shojin health stat. Yeah, when it was 500 health while
Yeah,
still get... It was just unnecessary for a Jax to be Eing you every 3 seconds while having an extra 500 health, I
yeah.
have to say, I am a huge fan. I know we've talked not negatively, but a lot of kind of things we wish that they would change. I'm gonna switch it to some of the things that I'm a bit more positive about, and cooldown reduction overall, I am very happy that is lower. I know some champions in your mid lane, especially that were kind of your spammy mage champions, and that have gotten a lot more awkward to play, but at least they're not weak. Whereas I think just the fact that you get champions like your Jaxes and your Jarvans and that, if you think back to last season with Trojan, you'd have Jarvan EQing every 2-3 seconds while he had Gore Drinker in the mid. Like, it was just
EQ auto Gore Drinker, and then he spaces you for like 5 seconds and does it
EQ
again.
Auto, and it was just, it was unkillable champion who had also just kind of shredding your entire team, and it was just unfun. Whereas I think this season, so far, you've got a lot less of that. Like, even when you try to build your cooldown reduction Jarvan items, you're still only EQing every kind of 4 to 5 seconds. So it just feels like you have that little bit more counterplay, and champions aren't quite as tanky with some of the items that they should be. So, yeah, I think they're doing a good job with the really cooldown. Interesting,
because Riot did this whole thing, right, where they said that increasing, like, this is talking maybe like half a year ago, like half a season ago, they really forced this point of view where they were like, look, it feels much better to play through like multiple rotations in fight. And they're right, it does. It 100%. Feels so much better to, like, you know, it feels awful to make one mistake and you die for it.
Yeah.
Imagine playing Furo against Jax and you parry wrong and he kills you, right? Like, just off one trade. No one's fed, no one's ahead, technically, in lane. But you misplay one thing and you die. It feels awful.
It should just be it should just be a one trade, not a you're dead. But that's what it is. It's
like,
just,
you lose like 30% health or whatever. It feels bad, but it's not over.
Yeah.
Right?
And then the next trade, if you parry the E correctly, you can trade it back to an equal stance.
You can bring it back.
Whereas it feels
so that's what
just...
they were aiming for. Yeah. That's what they were aiming for when they introduced all these changes, and that's explicitly what they said they were aiming for.
Yeah.
And then all that's really happened is, like, someone gets Storm Surge.
Oh, you've been hit by an enemy champion? You're dead.
Exactly. It's like...
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not complaining, per se, because I'm abusing this patch more than anything. Like, I am. I'm loving it, in a way. But it doesn't feel right. Yeah. And it feels awful for players that are playing champions that don't deal with being one-shot.
Yeah.
So I think any ADC player or support player is really going to feel it this patch.
Yep.
Just because, like, mid laners, jungle, everything's one-shotting you right now. Yep. Everything. Like, there's not a single champion in the game that isn't one-shotting you right now.
No. I've got a question from chat. Is there a particular role that has had a very negative impact by the changes? And I think quite obviously you'd point at ADC. Just so based on the fact, based on the fact that, in my opinion, ADC's got one item. Yeah, they got Terminus, which isn't built on every single ADC. Other than that, your item stayed pretty similar.
Right now, that's a Bruiser duelist item.
It's like a Bruiser or some on-hit champions later on, but it's not. Yeah,
it's a duelist item. It's not It's not an ADC item.
No, and so, especially in talking in a solo queue sense, I think they've suffered the most because, like we've talked basically the whole podcast, this season so far has just been a lot of damage, and ADCs struggle with taking a lot of damage. They don't have a huge amount of defensive items, and even then, most of them aren't good enough to stop you from, taking dick when you've just been hit by one ability. And so I think ADC is the role that has been negatively impacted the most. There, apart from, as we've said, ADCs that can spec into lethality, because it's basically a game of who does, more damage quicker. So any lethality ADC kind of has a chance to survive by killing the other person faster. Whereas if you're a traditional crit ADC, you're never doing enough damage in the 1 to 4 seconds that a fight kind of lasts before you're dead that you're relevant. And so I think, especially in a solo queue sense, you look at pro play and ADCs mean a lot more, but you have to remember they're all so well versed in how to play the game properly that you're never really getting jumped solo that it matters. So I think ADC they're suffering just due to the lack of their items and due to the strength of the new items that have come in.
For the most part, wholeheartedly agree. I do tend to think that the role most changed by this patch is probably invade junglers.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason for this is because tank junglers are doing very well right now.
Yeah.
In particular, like Rammus, etc. Like they clear way too well, way too healthily. Like the downtime in between ganks, which is supposed to be there for the fast clearing champions, is not really there for the slow clearing champions, if that makes
No.
sense. Like we have Rammus who like he's gonna clear the same speed that someone any other champion speeds, right?
Yeah.
We have Belveth, we have champions that clear this shit so quickly, but it's not a problem for them. They're
Yeah.
gonna clear this shit, they're gonna be sitting at Scuttle 30 seconds before it even spawns, you know?
Yeah.
And then we have champions like Rammus who take 0 damage during their clear. Quite literally zero.
Yep.
I've tried it. You can test this. You go out, you do your clear, you're full health. Like I'm telling you, you have to mess up this clear so bad to take any damage. Any damage at all. Like if you took damage during this clear, it's on you. It's not the champion's fault.
Yeah.
But every scuttle is worth the same now, which is awesome. It's fantastic. Early games are so less snowbally,
Mm.
but there is no downside to picking a late game scaling champion in the jungle now.
Yeah.
As long as you can clear grubs, you're totally okay. all camps are easy to clear. I'm telling you right now, I've played every jungle champion. There is not a single jungle champion that like struggles to clear right now.
Yeah.
At all. Which is, for the most part, fine. Except void grubs are so important. Those things give like 1,800 gold worth of stats alone for the first clear.
Yeah. Definitely an interesting point you've brought up with the void grubs there, because it's been a question I've been asked a lot about, are they really worth it? And I think that question it's such a big can of worms, right? There's so many avenues that you're going to go down with that question.
You would think so, but I'm telling you right now, it's as simple as the fact that they are broken.
See,
they are way too good.
I disagree, and I think this is the first thing that
Okay,
we're going to actually disagree on for a while.
I'm excited. Yeah.
But I think void grubs, yes, like the stats you get from them, especially if you get 3 early, and especially when you get 5 or 6 of them, 100% it is very strong, and it's a very nice, desirable thing to have. But I think that you have to determine whether it's worth giving up, because you basically are giving up the first and second dragon.
You're giving up
most of the time.
For the most part,
you are trading. Yeah. So in most of these scenarios, you are trading grubs for dragon, and I think it is so much more of a discussion whether you're actually going to be hitting towers enough that it makes sense to be giving up early dragons, compared to just stacking early dragons and then getting that soul later, because certain comps aren't going to be hitting towers enough that the stats actually matter. Certain comps aren't going to be chipping them away slowly. They're going to play a dragon fight, they're going to win it, they're going to hit a tower as 5 people and break the tower in one shot, where the voidlings don't really matter, and then the dragon soul is going to matter late game. So I think the question of just, do you go for grubs, yes, they're strong, it's not that simple, in my opinion, because I just think that while they are amazing, there's too many situations where people get 6 void grubs, they lose first 2-3 dragons, they're fighting soul when they're not strong enough, they lose soul, and then at 25-30 minutes, what are your void grubs doing when you're turtling in your base, right?
They're not doing anything. I'm going to present a slightly different alternative, which is, for the most part, the void grubs on their own aren't that insane, right? Like, yes, you're going to get an extra 200, 300 crew damage on a tower for autoing it 5 times, and that's pretty huge, but that's not the reason they're broken. You want to know the real reason I think these void grubs are so broken?
The XP they give?
Actually, Good point. No, that was not what I was about to go on to, but that works for me as well. Yeah, no, the XP gain is amazing because it's half a level at
Yep.
each rank. Like it's worth leaving your lane for an entire CS, like an entire wave of CS. You can give that. It doesn't matter. You go for the grubs, you get the grubs, you've won it. Like
Yep.
it's worth. But what I was going to say is the recall.
Okay. Yeah.
So the first three grubs, right? Just the first three. Only the first three. Your recall is halved for both mid, top, and jungle.
Yep.
Support might get it if they're up on the top side of the map while it's being taken. But for the most part, like we'll just assume safely that it's only the top, jungle, and mid that get the recall, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got literally half recall, like half the duration recall.
Yep.
That's 8 seconds down to 4 seconds every time you recall.
It's only
It's not
one
a big,
recall.
like, it doesn't sound like a big deal, but you think about the fact that, like, movement speed is probably the most underrated stat in the game.
Yep.
And half the reason is because you spend more time on the map, right?
Yep.
It's why people take Ingenious Hunter on Assassins, etc. The move speed is severely underrated. The recall speed is severely underrated. I can't tell you how many times I have been playing a lane top lane. It's totally even. And then we get grubs, I recall and come back to lane before they can push it in. And there's like, after that, the lane's over. I've won the lane, and it's not because I'm stronger, it's because I can recall for free.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty underrated. It's, in my opinion, hella underrated.
Yeah. I see that. Like, yeah, 100%.
And it's one of those exponentially scaling stats, you know what I mean? Like if you can recall for free, like you're gonna probably win lane over time. Just
Yeah.
just through the extra bonus.
You know, it's only one recall though. You only get the one recall that's reduced, and then it's back to normal.
That's news to me because as far as I can tell, playing it,
I'm
it's
pretty
on every
sure. I
recall.
could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the recall is just the first recall. At least that's what I thought, but I could
hope
be
you're
wrong
right.
here.
I hope you're right. I'd love to hear this.
Look, I could be wrong. This is what I think, but shit, I don't. It's only one. Okay, Chad is saying it's only one. I think it's every time you take.
Saying it's only one.
I think it's every time you take a Rift monster, you get a enhanced recall once.
I was gonna say I'm pretty certain it might have something to do with the fact that
I think it's every time
because
do it.
I'm playing top lane, I'm obviously in the role
Yeah.
more often. Yeah, I have noticed that I get those recalls a lot.
Yeah, I think
it's just because we prioritize grubs.
I definitely, yeah. I 100% agree with you that Grug's in the right hands.
It is only one. Yes,
Yeah.
it is only one.
In the right hands, I think that they are definitely very strong, and there are so many benefits to them. But I just don't think that they are cut and dry. Yes, they're strong. They're better than a dragon, because I think too many situations you're sitting on 6 scrubs in base and they're not doing anything.
I will say that there are many times that, in particular, the mountain dragon is up, and I have sat there and been like, you know what? Give the grubs. I want the mountain dragon. Like,
yes, and I think 100%.
Mountain Dragon feels so much better than anything else, and I would so much prefer the extra stats from that than anything else.
Yeah, we were
so
playing,
the grubs, like, they can piss off. I don't care.
Yeah, we were playing Clash last night, and that was a topic that was brought up during it. Was, you know, are we going to prioritize grubs or dragon? And it's like, well, which dragon is it? Because, you know, if it's an early cloud, then sure, we want to stack because the soul's more likely to be a good soul. If it's an early, you know, whatever dragon is, yeah, those stats are great. We want to prior that. But if it's a dragon you don't care about or a soul you're not going to care about, it's kind of just like grubs are probably going to be better because neither team's going to be prioring this dragon, and it's going to be a slow soul anyway. So it's definitely an interesting topic of whether you grubs over dragon, and it's not really able to be given a definitive answer, right? It's game by game.
I think it can, and I think it can only because of this patch, and only because of something you brought up, which is the XP game.
Yeah.
As a top laner, getting half a level worth of XP, the first time you do it, you're around about 6. You're either 6 or 5, right? Like, that's kind of the time you do the grubs. You get literally half a level worth of XP
Yeah.
off those. That's more than a wave at that point. That's more than a wave. So it's actually like you see people giving a wave and you go, oh, they're giving grubs or they're doing grubs. And you sit there and in your brain, you're like, oh, this is good for me because they're losing an entire wave, right?
Yeah.
And it's not good for you. You actually end up losing. And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
It feels really, really awkward around that top side of the map because a lot of junglers can straight up solo it. Brand, Lilia, etc. Like you don't even know it's being done until it's done because they take all of them at the one time, right? Like
Yeah.
they finish the shield at the same time so that when it pops up, it's done.
Yeah.
And if you're not playing a champion that can contest that, what do you do during the downtime that your camps are? You force a gank,
Yeah.
which is a potential. It's a maybe.
Yeah.
Or you force Krugs, which are available all the time. They're just there. They're just sitting there, you know? Like if you're a champion that can take those, you take those because they give you an entire level and then some worth of XP,
Yeah.
and they give you a massive buff on top of it.
Yeah.
And I think early game dragons, unless you're stacking them, they don't provide the same
Definitely not. No.
benefit, I guess.
No.
Yeah.
All right. I think we covered that pretty well. We
Oh,
have
I
a
would hope so.
question from Blooded, and this is one that I've never really thought about in my entire time playing League, but he has said, I think death timers are way too short early. If you get a solo kill in your lane, they just TP back and they lose nothing, and then they can just shove the lane on you and you kind of lose a lot of tempo. As a solo laner yourself, I'll let you take this because I don't really, notice it much. What are your thoughts on that, Zippo?
My first thought is if you're taking Ignite in a solo lane, you deserve to be butt fucked. This is your fault, like, first of all.
I don't think
My
Ignite was
second thought
specified,
is
but yeah, I get you.
My second thought is that TP is, yes, it's a safety net, I guess, is the best way to put it. Not only does it provide you a free recall early on, which has been balanced around several times, and I think it's in a pretty decent spot. Like, you get to come back to lane once every 5 minutes. You know, like, if you take Ignite to out pressure someone in lane and they take TP and they play it well, you're not going to have kill threat. And I think that's totally okay. In fact, I think that's actually how it should be. I think if you take Ghost or Ignite for lane, you need to make it worth it. Well worth it. Ghost in team fights late game is like there is no real what's the word I'm looking for? Like comparison. There's nothing that like beats it, if that makes sense.
Blood is
It's the
saying,
death time is
yeah,
early. Okay, yeah. So yeah. In that case, I would say Riot's been trying to gut snowballing for a very long time. And fair enough too, because it feels awful to lose a game in the first 15 minutes if you're just a little bit behind. I don't see any issue with it at all. If you kill your solo laner, you need to base. You're going to take the XP loss, but you're going to be ahead in gold. At least one half item, whether that be a longsword, cloth armor, etc. It's enough. It's more than enough.
I think this is
So
where wave management as well is definitely a big part of it, right? Like,
absolutely.
if
And
you're getting
micro
a
and macro
solo
come
kill,
into huge here.
yeah, if you're getting the solo kill, you need to be knowing what you're doing with your wave. Sometimes you're not going to have time to shove it or to
Like
just
I
set
can
up a
tell you
freeze
right
or
now, there
whatever.
are
But
times where I have solo killed my laner and been like, this is really, really good for me. And it wasn't.
no.
Because the wave freezes in front of their lane, I don't have a TP angle, like I end up frozen in front of their tower for a very long time. And I can tell you right now, there have been times where I've abused that very fact. Like someone kills me level 1 because I aggress too aggressively. And then I just perma freeze.
Yeah.
Like there are ways to play top lane. That's the way it is. It's a
Yeah.
very long lane.
I think,
I
as
don't see
Blood
an
had
issue.
said, solo kills mattered so much more in earlier league and older league, but now it definitely feels better to just be kind of managing wave and you know, kind of zoning off of CS and XP. And I think a fantastic example of it, although it's hard to pull off, is the boss. The way that he just controls top lane, despite the fact that he goes down, you know, so many kills, just because he controls lane. I think it definitely shows that Blooded's kind of onto something there with solo kills not mattering. But then I think to play it to such a level that the boss does is obviously, or the boss, sorry, it's obviously a very high skill cap that he performs it in. But it shows that kind of it is a bit of an issue that you can just fucking destroy someone and then, like, take Nasus for example. I don't know, man, that champion just gets shit on pre-6 and then kind of hits one item or whatever despite his level, and if he's played lane well or, you know, has the XP or the gold, he just seems unkillable after dying. And so I do agree with Blooded that a lot of the time solo kills just don't seem to matter as much, and you definitely seem to sometimes get punished more. But I think there's a lot more to it than just death timers or summoner spells or things like that. Like, it's
actually, I think this might tie into a lot of what Riot was saying they were trying to do, where like they're trying to introduce agency into champions rather than items, right? Like you want that snowball effect to feel like you've been outplayed rather than this guy's just stronger than me and he's just gonna fight me.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna use, I guess, Irelia as an example, because for me, that champion feels like if you have a winning matchup, you get your stacks up, you auto-attack them, you're going to win, right? Like, there's no real, like, counterplay in that lane. If you have the winning side, you just sort of auto-attack them to death. And for that, it feels like a lot of top laners kind of do that. Like, we have Yorick, we have all sorts of champions that just...
Tryndamere.
If you're fighting them 1v1, they beat you, right? Like, they just beat you. There's no real, like...
it's not a skill matchup lane. It's just you're
exactly.
losing.
There's no like outplay mechanic involved. It's kind of like, oh, I'm playing Irelia, he's playing Alawi, he ults, I Q to a minion and wait it out. You know, like it's very simple.
Something like Fiora, you know, Tryndamere. It's basically Tryndamere favored because what is she parrying? You know, basically the entire fight is. The entire fight is them doing similar amounts of damage, and then Tryndamere for 5 seconds gets to not die, and it's just like
so there's a stat check involved, right? Like there's no win-lose con. It's kind of just like, oh well, he played this champion, I played this champion, so I lose.
And this, I mean, in saying all this, is definitely outplay potential, but it's just skewed so heavily to it. It's not really you outplaying them; it's more your enemy misplaying. And I think when it comes down to, if you want to win a lane, your opponent has to mess up. It's always a shit feeling, man. Like, it's not nice because
it just doesn't feel good.
You just sit there and just kind of take it in the ass until you're like, oh, he's, you know, slipped out. It's my turn to take it. But yeah, I mean, once you get high elo, there's very, very few of those moments to turn it around.
Yeah.
I'm going to be back for 2 minutes.
A little bit here, where Harold stated that like the game should kind of always be in a state where killing your enemy should feel good. I like wholeheartedly agree. I think if you're in a position to like actually kill your laner, it should be a big thing, you know. And I think people need to play around that. But at the moment, it kind of feels like you can play pretty much anything into any matchup, and as long as your champion isn't utter dog shit, you will scale. And you will scale into a point where you can't be contested, because your champion just has abilities that other champions don't.
Sorry, I am back. I have a topic for you, Zippo, if you are happy to move on here.
I am certainly.
And it's a role that we have very, very not touched on basically at all. And that's support.
Speedy. Much love.
Love you, Speedy. Thank you for tuning in, brother. Support. We have not talked about that much at all, and I think support has had quite quite an impactful change this season with
This is the one I wasn't looking forward to. Oh my lord.
with the way that the new support item works and some of the support items, since I think supports were very heavily impacted by the mythic system. I think. Yeah, I think mythics were hugely impacting on supports.
If we're talking about the role that's most impacted in general,
yeah,
by this current class of items, it's support by far.
Yes, I think so. And with the whole change of mythics, I mean, you look at an item like Locket. That item is fantastic to build on. Honestly, any support if you're into a dive team comp, right? And being locked behind being a mythic when you're looking, when you're looking at enchanters and that who were locked into, if you didn't get Moonstone, you weren't going to really be an enchanter and all that kind of stuff. Having the ability to now buy the items like Locket and everything freely feels fantastic. But I more want to talk about the new support item and kind of the impact that's had on the current meta, because it's especially in pro player and higher elo, it's had a rather negative impact on the game. That kind of, you look at that item, you look at past seasons. Surely Riot could have looked at this and thought, "Hey, we've made this mistake before, right?"
This is literally Riot in a nutshell, though, right? Because you sit here and you're like, anyone with a brain cell, half a brain cell, could tell you that this is not good for the game, right? Like,
yeah,
this isn't just me talking. This isn't just me being like, oh, I have experience in this game, so like whatever. This is me being like, come on, Riot. Look at it. Like, look at the item and tell me there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. They have,
and then they released it anyway.
It has been fixed. It is no longer an issue in the game. But I think the fact that Pro Play went 2 weeks with this in it was just a little bit ridiculous.
You know, the worst part is they hotfixed it, and in its current hotfix state, it's useless. You can't use the item. They hotfixed it so badly that you can't actually use the item as intended. So you're meant to catch the CS, right?
Yeah.
You do that now, you get penalized.
There's a point where if you catch too much CS, you're penalized to the point where you cannot use it at all.
Exactly. You can't use the support item anymore. And it's penalized to the point where if you use it normally, as it's intended, it doesn't work. So
yeah, they'll have to look at it.
I don't know. That kind of tells you that Riot very clearly fucked up. And they know they fucked up. Yeah. And they're fixing it, which is fine. But it's also we're still at the point where Riot can make those kind of mistakes. And it's not a big deal. People need to realize
it only takes 8 CS to get the debuff. Yeah.
Exactly. People need to realize that Riot, they don't have a complete monopoly on their game yet. They're not...
Yeah.
They're not in that stage where they're happy with balance.
Yeah. Well, to swing it to the more positive side of the support item, because obviously it had its wee hiccup where it was double support item bot lanes for those that didn't realize. Basically because the items it turns into being 400 gold with so gold efficient that you would be down 30 CS, a kill and a level and still be up a K and a half gold while being strong. That's the issue. Yep. But they've fixed that, so double support item is gone. I want to talk about the actual options that the support item gives, the flexibility, and I think this is something that I think Riot have done a great job with.
I was going to say,
especially as a support player. No, I think they've done a fantastic job with the choice of support items you can
genuinely get. Really happy. Yes.
I think. While again the Blood Song and the Zaza, whatever it is, again it's just kind of damage on supports, but your mage supports, as much as people hate, it's just a mage, they just do damage, yes, but they don't do utility, they don't do engage. Okay, there's always a trade-off. As much as everyone hates them, they at least have a great support item for them in those options. I think Blood Song is the one that is probably slightly too overpowered or slightly too efficient. But I think it's a great idea for a lot of supports. Like, you look at your bards and centers and that, and it's a great item for them to get that bit more damage. You
And
know,
it's necessary, actually. Like,
yeah.
you want supports that give a little bit of pressure in lane. You do. You don't want them to take over lane. That's not
Hmm.
what you want. But you definitely want some lane heavy supports.
Yep. And
And I think
as
you're right. They nailed it with this
yeah,
item. It feels really good. Like, it
yep.
feels really good on these champions. Yeah.
And not only what the item turns into, but as Blood had said, the fact that the charges aren't you either hit them or you kill minions, the fact that it can now be both has bridged that gap, because it was very obvious that Spell Thieves versus Relic Shield supports, Spell Thieves had their wards minutes beforehand, which in League is a huge deal to have wards that much longer. It has bridged that gap
People don't
between
realize
melee.
20 seconds in League is a very long time.
Yeah, so
A very long
melee
time.
supports having that chance to stay on par to when they get their wards and when they get their finished item is a fantastic thing that they have done. So I think they've just done a top-notch job. And then the small crown guard item, I don't know the names of them yet, but the one that kind of gives those engaged champions that 30% damage reduction, it feels
Basically,
phenomenal,
passive,
man.
yeah.
Like, it felt really bad to be playing an engage support at towards the end of the season, because you just felt so squishy. And I think that item and the slay item as well, they just give you such good tools to really just do what you want to do, and there's the variation in them allows you to really play your supports, either roaming or as an engage or
So this
more
is
of a
interesting,
peel.
actually, because this kind of ties into Crown being a mid lane item, which a lot of people weren't happy about at all.
Yep.
And fair enough, too, because it kind of sucks to be like winning a lane and then they buy an item that just
Stops you from
nullifies it all.
existing. Yeah.
It just completely counters the lane. It feels awful.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting item because it went through a phase where in pro play it was standard, right? Like, Faker was rushing it on Azir
Yeah.
per se, and there's no reason not to build it because it gives you everything you want. It gives you damage, it gives you mana cooldown reduction, and it makes you safe. Like, it nullifies assassins entirely.
Yeah.
Quite literally, it just removes a class from the game.
Especially because they don't have that ranged ability to proc it early.
Exactly.
Their abilities to proc it are
Yeah.
their main damage sources. So
Exactly. So, like, it became this staple item in pro play because it was like, well, if you can't proc it,
you're not
there's
killing
no
me.
counterplay. Like, yeah, all of a sudden champions like Orianna, Azir, etc. become unkillable because they have this 70% damage reduction on an item. Whereas on a support class, it kind of feels balanced
Yeah, it
because
does.
they're not getting the gold to survive and all in. Like, if, as you say, if Nautilus lands a hook, he's in.
Yeah.
Like, he's in. Like, he
Yeah.
ain't getting out.
And
He
it's not
started that
like
fight, whether for good or for worse. He started
yeah,
it. Like,
and it's not
we're
like
going.
if the enemy Nautilus is sitting, under his tower with that shield up. It's not like you're like, oh shit, we can't
Exactly.
kill him. Like with an
There are ways
Azir,
to proc
it's
it.
or with an Azir, you
Yep.
look at it like, oh shit, Azir's back there, has crown, and is still hitting us. If a Nautilus is under tower with the shield, you're not worried because he's not doing anything if you're not able to proc it, right?
Exactly.
And so I think
Exactly.
definitely having that option on your engaged supports, it's where the item should
Yeah.
be. And it's obviously at
What I'm trying to say is, like, it feels much better to have that as an option for a class that doesn't really have options gold wise.
yeah, 100%.
Whereas, like, giving that option to mid laners when they already have kind of everything they need,
Yep.
like, it throws question marks in the air. Like,
Yeah.
it just forces everyone into building this defensive/offensive option that gives you both,
Yep.
and it creates a stalemate. In support, it creates a different dynamic because there are so many options. We have Lulu, like, we have like hyper carry supports, and if you pick that without accounting for the Nautilus, who can just like hard force and engage,
Yep.
like, there's a trade-off. There's a big trade-off.
Yeah.
So it feels good to have that as an option in the support role, and I'm going to say it outright. I think that's probably one of the best support buys I've seen in a long time. That might frustrate me a little in game because I might throw a skill shot at someone that takes 70% reduced damage and doesn't die, and I'm like, oh, you should have died there. But
it was needed.
it doesn't frustrate me to the point where it's like, oh, this guy's basically playing Malzahar and pressed ER and killed me. Like it doesn't feel unfair in that way. It's kind of like, you know what? This guy could probably use the 70% damage reduction because he can't even walk into his own jungle
And I'm
safely.
pretty sure the support one is only...
It feels a bit fairer.
It's only around 30% as well, so it's not like, what Crown was. It's not as broken.
I'm heavily exaggerating with the Malzahar.
Yeah, of course.
Passive. But what I'm trying to prove is that, like, it feels really bad to catch someone out of position and then not die.
Yeah.
But on a support, they kind of die anyway.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like, it doesn't fix that problem for supports where it's like, oh, I just am all of a sudden a tank. It's like, no, it's just I can engage without dying instantly.
Yeah. And on the other end of this this talk, it's not even just your engages, it's your Lulus and enchanters into hook champions.
Yep.
Although if you get hooked, even with this item, you're probably still going to die.
It
at least gives you that extra kind of second or two that you're not one shot instantly. You have that second to Lulu ult yourself, or to flash out, or even get an ability off onto your allies so that you at least do something. Whereas it used to just be, bingo, bango.
League of Legends, like it's a fantastic game, but the time to kill can't be too low.
No.
If it's too easy to kill someone, you don't have time to enjoy like the specifics of the game. You don't. You can't, like. There are so many ways to enjoy this game. There are so many ways to outplay someone. It feels awful if half of those are removed just because people die in 1 second.
Yeah.
Like.
But then there's that balance of there need to be some interactions where you should be dying in 1 second, and so
absolutely,
it's finding that balance.
If you want to have a class like assassins in the game, there needs to
they need to be able to assassin. Yeah.
But
I think
vice versa, you want DPS to be effective in the game, they need to have time to kill people.
Yeah.
It like you need to find that balance, and on this current patch, they haven't found that balance. No. They're so far off that balance, it makes me want to cry.
Yeah. But in saying this, everyone loves to give Riot employees and Riot's balance team shit. But there is way too much. No, and I'm not saying you are, but it's a very common thing that people, fire the whole balance team, this is shit. This is not an easy. There is how many over 130 champions in this game. There are hundreds of items. There are hundreds of abilities that all interact with each other. This is not an easy game to balance. It is not ever as simple as this needs to be done and that needs to be done. There are so many things you have to consider behind it all that I think, despite how, and it seems rude, but how often they get it wrong, I think they do a relatively good fucking job.
Props to them, because it's not as bad. Like, as much as I love to shit on this game, I do, because it's my, like, I love this game. Of course I'm gonna shit on it if
you're passionate about it if it's not right.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about League of Legends, but for the most part, they've actually done a really good job.
There's never really been...
I can confidently say that anybody that thinks that they are going to balance this game better than them, probably memeing themselves a little bit. Only because there's too many variables. It's very hard to keep this shit going live.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think, overall, they do a great job. There's never been, I think, a point in this game where, due to the balancing of the game, I've said, no, I will not play it. There's been seasons or patches...
missed out on Season 3.
Season 3 is commonly known... Well, actually, Season 4, I think, is wildly known as the best season. But 3...
I think you missed out on Season 3.
I played Season 3, but again, I never wanted to stop playing. Like, there were definitely rough patches. There's always going to be rough patches, but it's never been bad enough to the point that I do not want to play it because of the patches. Like,
Season 7. Harold, you're going to have to give me a little bit of context here because I'm curious. Season 7. What about Season 7?
Season 4 is 100%.
What about it was the most broken? Because for me, Season 3 was the season where I just had enough. Every single game was Kassadin pick or ban. Cassidy, kick or ban. I'm not kidding. If
Yeah.
it wasn't picked or
Look,
banned, it was a dodge. Okay,
yeah,
like
that
I'm not
was
kidding. It was
it
someone
was
dodged.
not a
You
good
couldn't play
time,
the game
but
without
yeah.
Cassidy being in it in the form of pick or ban. Like it was just there always.
I have a
And
question for you, Zippo.
it was like if someone got Cassidy and no one dodged,
APU.
Cassidy won. They won. Like it was an 80% win rate champion on champions that on people that didn't even
Okay,
play
yeah,
the champion.
okay.
It was not fair.
Ardent Sensor Meta
Oh, Arden
was
Sensor. Yeah.
look again. It was very
No, actually,
cringe,
no, actually, he couldn't. Like, he might have been able to say one or two things that would have changed my mind
and
on
that's
what
one
was
of
the
them.
worst season. But Arden Sensor, like, he's damn nail
Yeah,
on the head,
but
nail on the head. Like, Sensor was cancer. I'm sorry.
I need to
Dealing with
ask
fucking
though.
Lulu Cog every single fucking game was not
Yeah.
fun. It was not fun.
Question for everyone. We all think back to, season 4 especially, being the goated season, or the earlier seasons. Do you think if we had that season again that it would be the same, though? Do you think we would think it was the same, or coming from where we are now, would we have a lot of issues with it? But obviously it's it's 10 years ago now. What are we, season
This is
14?
good.
I don't know. But anyway,
Yeah, 14.1.
obviously
Yeah.
we have some fantastic nostalgia about that season being the best season.
Mhm.
But I don't think that if we went back, or if we were, right, was like, oh, next week we're playing season 4, I don't think it would be as good as it was back then.
I think you're damn right. I think if anything, people would be way more frustrated than they currently are because they're like we're kind of used to Riot doing some things and like experimenting a bit nowadays.
Yeah.
But like back then, things were pretty drastic. We had things like Xin Zhao, who had probably an extra half the range on his E that he currently has,
Yeah, and he had like
just
on
inbuilt
hit,
into
like
his kit.
APE where he would just perma heal with the
Yep,
waters. Yeah.
APE exactly, where the champion
I
did like
think
8k damage per Q and could spam it,
I
like could
think
literally spam it on
yeah.
cooldown. Like
I think
he
Ronald
was
has kind of nailed it on the head where he said no chance, because I think the biggest thing, and it's
exactly
kind of a
no.
combination of what Blooded
No,
and
he
Ronald
nailed it.
said,
Yeah,
where there was definitely less damage, and it was longer fights and all that kind of stuff. But I think a lot of that
it
came
wasn't
down to
balanced.
it came down to the fact that everyone was just so much worse at this game, right? You go back
Yep,
to that same setting with
exactly.
the level of skill that all players are. There is going to be so many more, broken shit, or people playing a champion this way when it was broken, that it's not, I don't think, And so I think that's a big thing when you look at the balance of the game and how each season progresses with, with the balance. While the game is changing, everyone else is just, the fundamentals of the game is so much better now. Back in season 4, if you placed a gold player versus a bronze player, that gold player would shit on the bronze player every fucking day.
Yeah,
Whereas these days,
wasn't even close.
if you put a gold player who knows how to play their champion against higher elo players, there's a very high chance he will win that based on just knowing how to
I
play
will
his
tell you right
champion.
now, there's a really good meme going around where it's like, how did you die or how did you lose, etc. It's like that Kung Fu Panda guy,
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
old
Oh, and
yeah.
it
He's like,
was a
how did you
duo
die?
boost of your higher elo.
How did you die against a gold player? And it's like, I don't know. And it's literally that. Like
Yeah,
sometimes I get absolutely clapped by players
yeah,
that very clearly aren't great. I've
yeah,
been playing this game for fucking almost 10 years.
yeah,
I would think I'd have an advantage in the
yeah.
majority of these games. And some of these players that have been playing for like 2 or 3 years, they're not bad.
No,
Mechanically, they're not bad at all. In
no.
fact, at their champions, I'd say they might even be better than me at
And that's the
like
thing, is
that base
just
level. Like
players in
they're just
general
playing
are
their
just
champion better than I am.
gamers in general are just picking up games faster. You get your new players into
Yeah,
league,
and that's a good thing. It's
exactly
a really good thing,
100%.
and it actually speaks volumes about the way that people are able to practice now. Because the only way you were able to practice earlier was queuing up for a game,
Yeah,
a ranked game. That was it. You queue up for league, you play league.
yeah.
That's it. You have maybe like ranked flex as an alternative, but
Yeah. So I definitely
it
think
doesn't.
just the skill level is a huge reason why
Yeah,
it's so much harder to kind of adjust everything.
absolutely.
Because the game back then, people were just poos. People that were high rank were actually high rank, and it, a lot of the
Oh yeah.
time came just down to mechanics rather than your game knowledge and stuff. Whereas now,
Look,
the difference between your lower and higher elo is very rarely mechanics. Like yes, it's definitely
yeah.
a part, but it is so much more
There's a
game
different
knowledge.
level there,
Yeah, it's so much more game knowledge
and
and
it's
macro
very
that carries
obvious.
you.
And like self plug here, self slight brag. But like season three, I was 900 LP. This was top 10 challenger, and I wasn't as good as I am now. But I'm not good anymore. Like back then, me being as good as was I was so much better than everyone else.
Yeah.
So much better. Things like I was playing Lee Sin top during a time where it wasn't like super meta, and it's because at the time an insect was a hard to execute
It was
combo.
almost
Like
unknown. If you ward
yeah,
hop kick
exactly.
somebody, you
Gragas E
were
Flash
yeah,
was insane. Like people lost their
and it's
minds
basically
over that. Whereas
mandatory on these champions
nowadays,
now.
a gold player can pull that off. If I'm sorry, if a gold player can't pull that off, they probably don't deserve to be gold. Like
Yeah,
it's just not that hard anymore. Yeah.
yeah, I agree. The skill gap is just, or the skill level of players is just infinitely higher. It's yeah,
Oh yeah. And people don't recognize that a little bit. I think
no,
a lot of people are like, oh, everyone sucks. And it's not quite the case. It's more like everyone's better than they were.
yeah,
A
yeah,
lot better than they were.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we've got about 10 minutes left roughly before we're gonna be
I
going
think we're
kind
gonna
of
finish it off
too
here. Yeah.
long. Before we finish, I will just ask if there's one more topic that chat has for us, anything that anyone has kind of bugging that they want us to talk about. Fire away now. We'll have a quick look at chat, and for this last kind of 10 or so minutes, we'll just quickly talk through
I'm
what
laughing
chat
at Blooded's
has.
reply because yes, Lee
That's
Sin
the
back in the
thing,
day.
right? Like,
Okay, Blooded, for a little bit of context, okay? Back when I played Lee Sin top, Brutalizer was an item, but it wasn't the item that it is today. Okay? Brutalizer was an item that gave only lethality back before lethality was a thing, so it was just flat armor pen. It was the only armor pen item of its time that gave flat armor pen. Okay? Not a percentage, none of this Cyril's grudge bullshit. It was just the only flat armor pen item. It gave damage, ability haste, and that was it. And lethality for armor pen. This item could be built on Renekton, Lee Sin, anything that just deal just a lot of damage, like one shot potential, okay? Renekton was one shotting people with W with this.
yeah.
This item was not okay. Lee Sin was QR queuing people, and people thought that was like an insane combo when it was really just as long as you land the Q, you hit the R, then the Q. Like it was that simple.
Yeah.
The game was at a point 5 years ago where that was like high mechanics.
Yeah.
Like you press your buttons quickly, oh, dang.
APM? Whoa!
Yeah, literally. Like people will lose their minds over it. So yeah.
Okay, so
These are the days where Gragas mid, you could E-flash over a minion and people were like, what? Like, what?
Yeah. Couple of questions we have there, Zippo. Who's the best teammate you've both played with, and why was he the best
Yes.
server on the server? Someone's fishing here, I think.
Oh, this is going to take me some
Actually,
time. Sorry,
if they were the best
is a big
server,
question.
if they were the best server, it is definitely Keister. That dude on server.
I was going to say, I think
Oh!
Blooded's pretty good. I think Blooded's pretty good.
Yeah. Ronald, you were amazingly fun to play with, but best server that I played with was definitely Keister. Especially when Sivir got that insane buff, he just ran with it. We've got
Ronald,
Humus's,
I love you beyond
Humus's Sword of the Occult. Yes,
No.
I kind of do, but at the same time it was fucked, so I think it's good that it was gone, and I think Medjay's is fine if we're going to ask about that. ADTF, the very recent buffs on him, I think was absolutely disgusting.
Wild.
It was unneeded. I think ADTF was
Unnecessary.
already strong and already killing people within the duration of a gold card, and now he does it easier, and if anything, it's just made APTF even stronger when he was already strong as well. So I think this has just pushed TF over the edge far too much. I think it was very unnecessary.
He's way too strong right now. And
when is
you
right
have
gonna remove
infinite
Flash?
options playing TF. You can come into the game with any sort of runes, anything at all, and you're fine. TF, yeah. Rogue.
What is your when is Riot gonna remove Flash, and much more OP will that make Dash champs? Are you asking how much more OP that would make them? I think if you remove Flash from the game, the entire community would stop playing. I think that is just far too.
I was gonna say, like, I think you actually might have a point there, Harold, where Flash probably should be removed, and I'm speaking from a balance standpoint, not like a fun standpoint. But I think if you removed Flash, it would destroy the game.
Yeah. League of Legends is Flash. If you remove Flash, you don't get flashy plays. You don't get I think Flash offers a lot of skill expression, and so while if you removed Flash, Dash champions would reign supreme. I don't think you'd be able to play in a mobile champion. Dash is absolutely pivotal for the game, and I don't think it could ever be removed, even in a hypothetical sense.
If you remove Flash, I'm telling you right now, champions like Irelia would become impossible to deal with.
And you think, Irelia has how many dashes? Doesn't matter. Flash is just too pivotal. And before we finish, quick thoughts on the new Elixir rune that replaced Perfect Timing, the stopwatch rune. And then on that topic, I'd like to also add the new rune stats, because that's something we didn't touch on that I think is a very interesting aspect.
Actually, good. Yeah. So I actually want your opinion first.
Okay.
I think on the rune that gives you the elixir, because I haven't used it yet, and I've been meaning to try.
I have used it.
I just haven't found a game where I've felt comfortable picking it.
I think
so. In my mind, it feels like a bait rune, but I'm not. I'm actually not sure.
I think it is a very niche rune, and I think once we kind of discover and experiment with it more and find out where you can use it, I mean, it'll become stronger. I think on Udia, it is like kind of. I mean, people have already worked it out, but it's kind of interesting because you can actually get all of your stats fully leveled up.
You get all the elixir stats from it,
which kind of matters because you used to only get to max all with your 3 abilities and one missed its last point. Now you get it. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of good for him. The other elixirs, I mean, one of them gives you a little bit of gold and some stat. I don't really know how they work, to be completely honest with you, but I think it's definitely an interesting, spicy little change that, I think people are going to work out how to use, and I think it's going to become, a relatively meta rune.
Definitely a nice option. I like the addition of the change purely because it gives you another option. It's not just, I take cookies for lane dominance anymore.
Yeah.
But I have no idea how strong it is.
Like Blood had said, for champs that have 2 strong abilities and a utility, getting to put that extra point in a strong ability earlier,
that makes a lot of sense. I can see it being really, really well
like Veigar, for example.
Champions. But for me, a player who plays more aggressive matchups, I like to counter pick, etc. Like, the rune feels like a wasted slot because
I think it replaces what it replaces is too strong for a lot of champions, which is where I think that hesitation to take it comes.
Yeah, that's my problem. Is like it looks like a good rune on paper, and I sit there and I'm looking at it in champ select, and I'm like, oh, I want it, but like, what do I take? Like, what do I take over it? Like, what takes that slot? And I can't figure it out. So until I figure that out, it will remain unknown.
Yeah.
Kana.
And on the topic, before we close it, the topic of the rune stats, changing them, I don't know the exact ones, but I know that they've definitely added in the likes of tenacity and movement speed.
10% tenacity and move speed.
2.5%, I think, or 2%?
It was 2%.
2%.
Just 2%. Yep.
What are your thoughts on those?
And then they have 85 or 10 to 185.
Yeah, so scaling AD or scaling health or health are the biggest changes they have. what are your quick thoughts on, adding those quite... You love it?
I love it. I love it so much because, look, it was never really enjoyable to me to like go into a lane matchup where someone picks a flex.
Yeah.
So like half the reason is because flexes were so strong for a very long time because if you enter a lane matchup where you're not sure what you're up against and you're like you have options like Jace or Rumble, etc.,
Yep.
you're gonna take the health rune.
Yep.
Like you're going to because you don't know what you're up against and taking the wrong rune is just so bad that
It felt
you know what I mean?
awful.
Like it almost ruins your lane. Yeah. So they've kind of removed that guessing part of the game and kind of made it more like, what do you want?
Yeah.
Right? Like the 2% move speed, a lot of people aren't going to take that because 2%, like, sounds like nothing.
But I mean, if you've got no other options, it's fantastic. It's actually always useful. And same with the tenacity.
But it actually feels really good on a lot of champions. Like,
yeah.
For example, if you're playing Talon mid, okay, and you're playing against a matchup where you can actually kill them, you're not going to take that 2% MS. You're not.
No.
You're going to spec a little bit more into damage, and you're going to keep that kill threat up. So it feels like more of a decision now.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I'm up against this matchup. I'm probably not going to be dueling as much. I'm going to go less duel-oriented runes.
Yep.
And opt for the more like...
That's the thing. On the other end
champion
of that,
identity runes.
If you're playing
which
Talon
I think
into
feels amazing and is such a good change.
Yeah, if you're Talon into a matchup you can't kill, you get a little bit more movement speed. Roaming becomes quicker. You don't lose as much for it. So I think it's
same thing in a top lane matchup where you're gonna lose the early game matchup. You take the HP scaling. Yes, you're gonna lose a little bit early game, but it pays off.
Yeah, I think it was fantastic because they were pretty, like you say, and I think it's the big reason that they did it is you took the wrong resistance rune in lane. You were down. You were down a rune stat, and it felt bad. Yeah. And so having this versatility where, there's a lot of CC, having an extra 10% tenacity is going to feel nice no matter what.
I love the tenacity changes too.
Yeah.
There's a tenacity change that is gone really, really underrated in this patch, which is tenacity is way less available across the board. But the way it's available is better.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to spec into magic resist just to get tenacity. You have stuff like Steric's Gauge, which has 20% tenacity on an item that has no resist, only health and damage. It feels great for bruises. Like you don't have to spec into Merc Treads when Tarbies is very clearly the better choice.
Just for tenacity.
Just because of CC. Yeah. And vice versa. Like, Tarbies is no longer the go-to break and auto attack damage item. It's more so like the Warden's Mail, etc.
Yeah.
So I think it's starting to like get to a point where items have a little bit more identity. They're just probably a little bit overtuned at the moment.
Yep. No.
I'm not sure if that was intentional by Riot or whether it was just like a...
I think you're going to get that at the start of every season, no matter what, But I think they're doing a good job. A lot of their hotfixes on the right track. So I think an overall conclusion that both myself and Zippo have with the start of this new season is, especially compared to the recent seasons...
optimistic.
Yeah, especially compared to the recent seasons that just a lot of people have not felt great about. Yeah, I'm very positive and very hopeful for where this season is heading. So I'm very excited to see Riot working this out. But that will bring us to the end of the podcast. We intended on doing 30 minutes for our first one just to kind of get into it, and we've gone for an hour and a half. So, absolutely fucking wee-hoo. I want to first of all give a big shout out to everyone that kind of, stuck it in the whole time. The support's been awesome. The chat interaction has been awesome. It's it's very helpful for us to be able to bounce off of you guys. Keeps it going. So thank you very much for everyone supporting us.